Good morning, champions. Let me ask you something. Who are you? No, really. Who are you at your core? Because right now, at this very moment, your identity is shaping your entire life. It's dictating what you believe is possible, what you tolerate, what you chase, and what you let slip away. Your identity is the foundation of your destiny. And here's the truth. Most people don't even realize they're trapped in an old identity. They think they need more motivation, more discipline, more strategy. But let me tell you something. You don't need another plan. You need a new identity. Because when you shift who you are at your core, everything else follows. Your mindset changes. Your actions change. And suddenly the results that once felt impossible become inevitable. So today isn't just another day. Today is about stepping into the version of you that was always meant to rise. Are you ready? Let's go. Who you believe you are at your core determines everything. Your decisions, your habits, your relationships, your level of success, and ultimately your destiny. Most people think life is about circumstances, luck, or even hard work, but none of those things can override a deeply ingrained identity. If someone sees themselves as a failure, they will find a way, consciously or unconsciously, to sabotage any success that comes their way. If someone identifies as a winner, they will rise above setbacks, push through obstacles, and create opportunities where others see none. Think about this. Two people can be given the exact same challenge. One crumbles under pressure, making excuses about why it's too hard, too unfair, or simply impossible. The other person, faced with the exact same problem, sees it as an opportunity to grow, to test their limits, to prove to themselves who they really are. What's the difference? Not intelligence, not resources, identity. Your identity is like the thermostat in a room. If it's set to 72 degrees, it doesn't matter if the doors are open and a cold wind blows in. It will fight to regulate itself back to 72. The same thing happens in life. If your identity is set at a level of struggle, no matter how much money you make, no matter how many times you get ahead, you will always find a way to bring yourself back to where you subconsciously believe you belong. On the flip side, if your identity is set for success, even if you lose everything, you will find a way to rebuild, to rise, to create again, because that is who you are. Most people are trapped in an identity they didn't even choose. It was shaped by their past, by their parents, by their failures, by their fears. They say things like, "I've always been this way," as if their identity is set in stone. But identity isn't permanent, it's a decision. The moment you decide to redefine who you are, you begin to shift your destiny. Everything you do, everything you achieve, everything you settle for is a direct reflection of the identity you hold. You don't get what you want in life, you get what you believe you are. If you believe you are someone who always struggles, you will unconsciously create struggle. If you believe you are someone who thrives no matter what, life will bend to that belief. The key is that identity isn't something you wait for, it's something you claim. The most successful people in the world didn't wait for proof before believing they were successful. They decided first, and then they acted in alignment with that decision until reality caught up. This is why people who win the lottery often go broke, while self-made millionaires who lose everything find a way to rebuild. The money isn't the difference. The external circumstances aren't the difference. Identity is the difference. The lottery winner never saw themselves as wealthy, so they made decisions that brought them back to where they were comfortable. The self-made millionaire never saw themselves as broke, so even when they hit rock bottom, they knew it was temporary. You don't need more willpower. You don't need more motivation. You don't even need more skills. You need to raise your identity, because once you do, everything else, your habits, your standards, your outcomes, will rise with it. Too many people walk through life carrying the weight of their past like a chain around their neck. They let their past mistakes, failures, and painful experiences define who they are. They replay old stories in their minds, reinforcing a version of themselves that no longer serves them. Maybe someone told them they weren't smart enough, strong enough, or good enough. Maybe they failed at something once, and instead of seeing it as an event, they made it their identity. The truth is, the past is just a story. It's something that happened. It is not who you are. But the problem is, most people don't separate what happened to them from who they are. They take past failures and make them personal. If they lost money in a bad investment, they don't just think, I made a bad decision. They start saying, I'm bad with money. If they struggled in school, they don't think, maybe I just didn't have the right learning strategies. They say, I'm not smart. If they've been hurt in relationships, they don't think that person wasn't right for me. They start believing, I'm unlovable, or I'll never find real love. The past only has power over you if you continue to breathe life into it. Every time you relive an old failure, every time you repeat an old story, every time you allow your past to dictate your future, you are choosing to stay stuck in an identity that no longer belongs to you. Just because something happened doesn't mean it has to define you. The brain is a pattern recognition machine. If you tell yourself something enough times, it becomes your truth. If you tell yourself, I've always been this way, your brain will find every piece of evidence to support that belief. But if you start saying, I am not my past, your brain will start looking for proof of that instead. Think about people who have turned their lives around. Athletes who were once told they'd never make it, entrepreneurs who failed over and over before finally breaking through, individuals who hit rock bottom and still found a way to rise. What separates them from the ones who stay stuck, it's not luck, it's not external circumstances, it's the fact that they refuse to let their past define them. They made a conscious decision to rewrite their story, to break free from the identity that no longer served them. Your past is nothing more than a set of lessons, a training ground, a stepping stone to something greater. But if you keep reliving it, if you keep attaching your identity to it, you are voluntarily imprisoning yourself in a life that isn't meant for you. There is no rule that says who you were yesterday has to be who you are today. People transform their lives in an instant the moment they decide to change what they believe about themselves. The problem is, most people never make that decision. They let their past decide for them. Painful experiences, mistakes, disappointments, these things happen to everyone. But the people who break free are the ones who refuse to carry those things forward. They don't ignore the past, but they don't let it define their future either. They take the lessons, leave the rest, and step into a new identity. The only thing that matters is who you decide to be now. Every transformation, every breakthrough, every massive shift in life begins with a single, undeniable force: the power of decision. People talk about wanting change, they dream about success, they hope for a better life, but nothing, absolutely nothing, happens until a real decision is made. And not just any decision, but a decision backed by commitment, by action, by an unshakable resolve to follow through no matter what. Most people don't realize they aren't actually making decisions, they're making preferences. They say, I want to be healthy, but the second it gets hard, they fall back into old habits. They say, I want financial freedom, but they never commit to learning, taking risks, or doing the uncomfortable work required to achieve it. That's not decision, that's wishful thinking. A real decision means cutting off any other possibility. It means burning the boat so there's no turning back. It means saying, this is who I am now, and I will act accordingly no matter what challenges come my way. The difference between those who succeed and those who stay stuck isn't intelligence, talent, or luck. It's the power of their decisions. The moment someone decides they will not settle for less, that they will no longer tolerate mediocrity, that they will do whatever it takes to create a different reality, everything changes. Their focus sharpens, their energy shifts, their standards rise. Think about a time in your life when you made a real decision, one where there was no hesitation, no going back. Maybe it was leaving a toxic relationship. Maybe it was quitting a dead-end job. Maybe it was taking a leap of faith into something new. In that moment, you didn't just hope things would change. You knew they had to because you left yourself no other option. That's the power of decision. Decisions shape identity. Every time you make a decision, you reinforce a belief about who you are. If you constantly make decisions that align with strength, discipline, and courage, you start seeing yourself as someone who is strong, disciplined, and courageous. But if you keep making decisions based on fear, procrastination, or self-doubt, your identity shrinks to fit those choices. You become the person who hesitates, who waits, who never fully commits. The problem is, most people let life decide for them. They wait for the right time, they wait for motivation, they wait for circumstances to change. But life doesn't work that way. The people who achieve the most aren't the ones waiting for the perfect moment. They are the ones who decide to act even when they don't feel ready. Think about someone who changed their life dramatically. Maybe they lost 100 pounds, built a multi-million-dollar business, or overcame adversity that would have broken most people. What do they all have in common? At some point, they decided that their old way of living was no longer acceptable. They stopped negotiating with their excuses. They stopped waiting for permission. They stopped allowing their circumstances to dictate their future. A true decision isn't just a thought. It's a command to your brain, your body, and your entire being to move in a new direction. It's not a maybe or an I'll try. It's a declaration. It's saying, this is who I am now, and then proving it with action over and over again. Most people believe they need the right resources, the right opportunities, or the right conditions before they can succeed. But history proves otherwise. Some of the most successful people in the world started with nothing. No money, no connections, no advantages. Except for one thing, they decided. They decided they would find a way. They decided failure wasn't an option. They decided they were going to make it happen no matter how long it took or how hard it got. Every major breakthrough in human history started with a decision. Civil rights movements, technological revolutions, personal transformations, none of them happened by accident. Someone, somewhere, decided that change was no longer optional. They didn't wait for a guarantee, they didn't ask for permission, they didn't entertain doubt, they made the decision and their actions followed. The power of decision is the ultimate force that separates those who create extraordinary lives from those who settle for average. It is the moment when everything shifts, when excuses die, when limitations crumble, and when the future is no longer left to chance. Your identity isn't something you merely hope for, and it isn't shaped by what you want to be. It is determined by the standards you live by every single day. Wishing to be successful, wishing to be confident, wishing to be fit, wishing to be disciplined. None of it matters unless your standards demand it. The difference between those who achieve at the highest levels and those who remain stuck is not luck, talent, or background. It's the standards they refuse to drop below. A wish is passive. It's something people think about, talk about, dream about, but never truly commit to. A standard, on the other hand, is non-negotiable. It's the line you refuse to cross, the expectation you set for yourself, the level at which you operate no matter how you feel or what circumstances arise. Your true identity isn't what you say you want, it's what you're willing to accept and what you refuse to tolerate. People don't get what they want in life, they get their standards. If your standard is to always show up no matter what, then that is who you become. If your standard is to never settle for less than you're capable of, then that is the life you create. But if your standard is to let excuses dictate your actions, if your standard is to settle for good enough, if your standard is to let fear stop you, then that too is your identity. Look at the most successful people in any area, business, sports, health, relationships. What separates them isn't that they wish harder than others, it's that they hold themselves to a different level of expectation. They don't hope to be great at what they do, they demand it from themselves. They don't wait until they feel like taking action. They take action because their identity commands it. Their standard is to show up at their best, and because of that, their results reflect it. Think about someone who struggles with their health. They may want to be fit. They may wish to lose weight, have more energy, feel better in their own skin, but if their standard allows them to skip workouts, eat whatever is convenient, or quit when it gets tough, then their identity is shaped by that standard. On the other hand, someone who holds himself to the standard of being strong, healthy, and disciplined won't allow those same behaviors. Even when they don't feel like it, even when life gets in the way, they still find a way to uphold their standard. That's the difference. Every habit you have, every decision you make, every action you take is a direct reflection of your standards. If you don't like where you are in life, don't look at what you wish was different. Look at the standards you've been living by. If your finances are a mess, it's because your standard has allowed it. If your relationships are failing, it's because your standard has tolerated it. If you're not where you want to be in life, it's because your standard has been set too low. Your identity is constantly being reinforced by what you accept from yourself. If you set a standard that you never hit snooze, that you always give your best effort, that you follow through on your commitments no matter what, then that becomes who you are. But if your standard allows for excuses, procrastination, or inconsistency, then that is also who you are. The challenge most people face isn't that they don't know what to do, it's that they haven't raised their standards to the point where those actions become automatic. When something becomes your standard, it is no longer a choice, it is simply what you do. You don't need willpower to brush your teeth every morning because your standard is personal hygiene. You don't need motivation to show up for work because your standard is to provide for yourself. The goal is to raise your standards so high that excellence, discipline, and success become just as automatic. The best part is you don't need permission to raise your standards. You don't need someone else to validate your worth before you decide to expect more from yourself. At any moment, you can say, this is no longer acceptable, this is who I am now, and from that moment on, your actions, your habits, and your results will begin to align with that new standard. The only question is, what will you demand from yourself? Every single one of us walks through life carrying labels, some given to us by others, some we've placed on ourselves. These labels are powerful. They shape the way we think, the way we act, the way we see ourselves, and ultimately the future we create. The labels we accept become the invisible walls that either limit us or set us free. Think about it. From the moment we are born, people assign labels to us. They tell us who we are, what we're capable of, what we should or shouldn't do. Maybe a teacher once said, "You're not a good student," and suddenly that label became part of your identity. Maybe a parent told you you're shy and you carried that into adulthood, believing social confidence wasn't an option for you. Maybe a past failure led you to believe, "I'm not good with money," and now, without even reinforcing it, you reinforce that label with every financial decision you make. Labels are not just words, they are mental programs. They dictate what you believe about yourself, and what you believe about yourself dictates your actions. If you accept the label of "I'm not a leader," then even when an opportunity to step up presents itself, you'll hesitate. If you accept the label of "I'm bad at relationships," then even when you meet the right person, you'll unconsciously sabotage it. If you accept the label of "I'm unlucky," then every challenge will feel like proof that life is against you. But here's the truth, labels are a choice. They only have power over you if you accept them. You were not born with labels. You were not born thinking, "I'm bad at math," or "I'm not athletic," or "I'll never be successful." Those ideas were planted in you by experiences, by people, by culture, but none of them are set in stone. You have the power to reject any label that no longer serves you. Look at the most successful people in the world. Do you think they never had negative labels placed on them? Of course they did. But the difference is they refused to accept them. They chose different labels. Where others saw failure, they saw resilience. Where others saw limitation, they saw potential. Where others saw struggle, they saw growth. History is filled with people who were labeled one way but refused to let that define them. Albert Einstein was labeled slow as a child. Oprah Winfrey was told she wasn't fit for television. Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team. Imagine if they had accepted those labels. Imagine if they had let those words dictate their future. They didn't, because they knew that labels only have meaning if you give them meaning. The problem is, most people don't even realize they're carrying labels. They don't recognize that they're living under an identity that was imposed on them years ago. They don't question whether those labels are real or just outdated stories they've been telling themselves. And as long as they don't question it, they stay trapped in a cycle that repeats itself over and over. Think about your own life. What labels have you accepted? What words have you allowed to define you? And more importantly, are they serving you or are they limiting you? Because if they are limiting you, it's time to tear them off. The first step is awareness. You have to identify the labels that are running your life. The second step is rejection. You have to consciously say, "This is not who I am." And the third step is replacing those labels with new, empowering ones. If you've been telling yourself, "I'm not disciplined," change it to, "I am someone who follows through." If you've been saying, "I'm not smart enough," change it to, "I am always learning and growing." If you've been living under the label of "I'm just average," change it to, "I am capable of extraordinary things." Because the truth is, your brain will believe whatever you tell it. If you repeat something enough times, your identity will shift. And when your identity shifts, your actions follow. When your actions follow, your future transforms. The labels you choose today will shape the life you live tomorrow. The question is, will you let old limiting labels control you, or will you take back that power and redefine who you are? Your identity is not just formed by what you think or what you do, it is profoundly influenced by the environment you put yourself in. The people around you, the conversations you engage in, the standards you surround yourself with, the physical spaces you spend time in, the information you consume. These all act like invisible forces shaping the person you become. Most people don't realize just how much their surroundings dictate their thoughts, beliefs, and actions. They think they have full control over who they are, but the reality is, we are always being shaped by what's around us. If you spend your time around people who constantly complain, doubt, and settle for mediocrity, you will unconsciously absorb those same patterns. If you surround yourself with people who push limits, seek growth, and hold themselves to high standards, you will naturally rise to that level. Look at the most successful people in any field, athletes, entrepreneurs, artists, leaders. None of them got there alone. They placed themselves in environments that forced them to grow. They sought out mentors who stretched their thinking. They eliminated toxic influences that dragged them down. They surrounded themselves with people who demanded more from them than they might have demanded from themselves. Because proximity is power. The closer you are to people who operate at a higher level, the more their mindset, habits, and beliefs will influence you. If you spend time with people who take massive action, who refuse to make excuses, who expect excellence, then you will start expecting more from yourself. You're surrounded by people who play small, who procrastinate, who let fear dictate their decisions, then you will adopt those patterns without even realizing it. And it's not just about people, it's about everything in your environment. The books you read, the podcasts you listen to, the shows you watch, the places you go, the conversations you engage in. If you constantly expose yourself to negativity, gossip, and distractions, your mind will be conditioned to operate at that level. But if you fill your environment with knowledge, inspiration, and challenge, your identity will start to shift to match that. Think about someone who grew up in a household where money was always a struggle, where they constantly heard phrases like, "We can't afford that," or "rich people are greedy." That environment shaped their beliefs about wealth, which in turn shaped their decisions and ultimately their financial reality. Now, imagine that same person surrounding themselves with successful entrepreneurs who see money as a tool for growth and impact. Over time, their beliefs would start to shift, and with new beliefs come new behaviors and new results. Your environment can either be an anchor that holds you back or a force that propels you forward. If you're in a space that reinforces old, limiting patterns, your identity will stay stuck in that version of yourself. But the moment you put yourself in a new environment, a moment that challenges you, that inspires you, that forces you to stretch beyond your comfort zone, your identity will expand to meet that new standard. Look at elite athletes. They don't train with people who are average. They put themselves in environments where they are constantly pushed beyond what they think is possible. They don't surround themselves with people who make excuses. They surround themselves with winners, with competitors, with those who demand excellence. And because of that, their identity becomes one of excellence. Think about someone who is struggling to break free from bad habits, whether it's smoking, unhealthy eating, or procrastination. If they stay in an environment that encourages those behaviors, they will struggle endlessly to change. But if they put themselves in a space where the norm is discipline, health, and productivity, their behaviors will naturally start to align with that new environment. Because here's the truth: willpower is weak, but environment is strong. You can try to force yourself to be disciplined, to be focused, to be motivated, but if your surroundings are pulling you in the opposite direction, you are fighting an uphill battle. The easiest way to change your identity is to change what you surround yourself with. If you want to be more confident, spend time with confident people. If you want to be more successful, put yourself in rooms where success is the standard. If you want to be healthier, create an environment where health is automatic. Most people don't consciously design their surroundings. They just accept whatever they've been given. They stay in the same social circles, in the same routines, in the same limiting environments, and then wonder why they struggle to change. But the reality is, if you want a new identity, you must create an environment that supports that identity. Every major transformation starts with a shift in surroundings. It starts with choosing to step into spaces that demand more from you. It starts with eliminating toxic influences that pull you backward. It starts with surrounding yourself with people, places, and ideas that stretch you, that inspire you, that remind you of who you are truly capable of becoming. Because at the end of the day, your surroundings are shaping your identity, whether you realize it or not. Everything you do, every action you take, every decision you make is driven by the identity you hold. Identity isn't just how you see yourself, it's the deep unconscious set of beliefs about who you are and what you're capable of. And that identity controls your behavior far more than willpower, motivation, or external pressure ever could. Most people think they act a certain way because of their habits or their emotions, but in reality, they act in alignment with who they believe they are. If someone sees themselves as an athlete, they don't try to work out, it's just who they are. If someone identifies as a leader, they don't hesitate to step up and take charge in tough situations. If someone believes they're an entrepreneur, they don't sit around waiting for permission, they create opportunities. But the opposite is also true. If someone identifies as lazy, they will find ways to reinforce that belief, even if they consciously want to be productive. If someone believes they are bad at relationships, they will subconsciously sabotage connections. If someone thinks they are destined for financial struggle, their actions will align with that belief no matter how many opportunities come their way, because identity is the foundation of all behavior. It's not about what you want to do, it's about who you believe you are. And the truth is, you will always act in a way that is consistent with your identity, even when you don't realize it. Think about it this way. If someone identifies as a healthy person, they don't have to force themselves to eat well or exercise. Their behavior naturally follows their identity. But if someone sees themselves as out of shape or undisciplined, even if they start a new diet or fitness plan, their subconscious will eventually pull them back to their old behaviors because they still see themselves as the same person. This is why so many people struggle with lasting change. They focus on changing their behavior without changing their identity. They set goals, they try new habits, they push themselves for a while, but if they still see themselves as the person they were before, they will always revert back. But when you shift identity first, behavior follows automatically. If you go from seeing yourself as someone who tries to be confident to someone who is confident, you won't need to force yourself to speak up, you just will. If you shift from seeing yourself as someone who wants to be successful to someone who is successful, your actions will naturally reflect that identity. Look at the most disciplined people in the world. They don't rely on motivation. They don't wake up and debate whether they should stick to their commitments. They act in alignment with their identity. A Navy SEAL doesn't try to push through discomfort. They see themselves as someone who does hard things no matter what. A world-class musician doesn't hope to practice. They identify as someone who is dedicated to mastery. Your brain is wired to protect your identity, even if it's an identity that doesn't serve you. If you see yourself as shy, your mind will find ways to justify staying quiet. If you believe you're bad with money, you will unconsciously make decisions that keep you in financial stress. If you tell yourself you're not good at something, your actions will reflect that belief, no matter how much potential you actually have. The fastest way to change your behavior isn't through willpower, it's through identity shift. Instead of saying, I need to be more disciplined, start telling yourself, I am a disciplined person. Instead of saying, I need to work on my confidence, shift to, I am a confident person. Instead of, I want to be successful, make it, I am someone who always finds a way. Because when identity changes, behavior follows effortlessly. You won't have to try to do the right things. You'll simply do them because that's who you are. You won't have to battle yourself over decisions. You'll automatically make choices that align with your new identity. And when you start acting in a new way consistently, your brain reinforces that identity even further, making the transformation permanent. Everything in life, your habits, your relationships, your success, comes down to the identity you accept for yourself. If you don't like your current results, don't just try to change your behavior, change how you see yourself, and the behavior will take care of itself. Fear isn't just a reaction to the unknown. It isn't just an emotional response to uncertainty or risk. Fear is what happens when your identity is in conflict with your desires. When the person you see yourself as doesn't align with the action you need to take. And until that conflict is resolved, fear will always control your decisions, your actions, and ultimately your future. Think about it. Have you ever wanted to do something big, start a business, step into leadership, take a bold risk, but felt paralyzed by fear? That fear didn't come from the action itself. It came from a deeper internal battle. Who you believe you are versus who you need to become to make it happen. If deep down you see yourself as someone who plays it safe, who avoids attention, who isn't good enough to succeed, then the moment you try to step outside that identity, fear shows up. Not because you're incapable, but because your mind is trying to protect you from becoming someone you don't yet believe you are. And this is where most people stay stuck. They want success, but they still identify as someone who struggles. They want confidence, but they still see themselves as uncertain and small. They want freedom, but their identity is still tied to limitation and scarcity. That internal conflict creates fear, fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of stepping into the unknown. Fear isn't logical. Fear doesn't care about facts. Fear doesn't ask, are you actually prepared for this? It simply asks, does this action match who we believe we are? And if the answer is no, fear kicks in, making you hesitate, second guess yourself, and retreat back to what feels safe. But here's the real danger. If you let fear win, your identity becomes even more ingrained. Every time you avoid taking action because of fear, you reinforce the belief that you're not the kind of person who does that thing. And the stronger that belief becomes, the harder it is to break free. Look at the people who live with confidence and certainty. It's not because they're fearless. It's because they have no conflict between their identity and their actions. A leader doesn't hesitate to take charge because they see themselves as a leader. A successful entrepreneur doesn't fear making decisions because they identify as someone who figures things out. A world-class athlete doesn't fear competition because their identity is built around performing under pressure. But none of them started that way. They had to rewrite their identity to match the future they wanted. They had to push through the fear by shifting the way they saw them. And the moment their identity aligned with their actions, fear lost its power. Think about your own life. Where is fear holding you back? What's the identity conflict underneath it? Because fear isn't the real problem. The real problem is that deep down, you still see yourself as someone who can't, isn't ready, or doesn't deserve it. And until you change that identity, fear will always win. The moment you decide to see yourself differently, everything shifts. Fear no longer becomes a stop sign. It becomes a signal that you are stepping into a new identity. And the more you align with that new version of yourself, the more fear fades, because now your actions and your identity are working together instead of fighting against each other. Your identity isn't something you're born with, it's something that gets shaped over time. It is not fixed, not predetermined, not written in stone. Your identity is built through the things you do repeatedly, the thoughts you think over and over again, the patterns you reinforce day after day. What you do consistently becomes who you are. Think about any belief you hold about yourself. Maybe you see yourself as a leader, as a problem solver, as a risk taker, or maybe you see yourself as someone who struggles with discipline, who isn't confident, who always plays it safe. Where did those beliefs come from? They weren't built in a single moment. They were reinforced through repetition, through actions and thoughts that over time solidified into an identity. If you tell yourself every day, I'm not good at speaking in public, then every time an opportunity to speak comes up, you will hesitate. That hesitation reinforces the belief, and the belief reinforces the hesitation, creating a loop that strengthens your identity as someone who struggles with speaking. But if instead you repeatedly step up, even when it's uncomfortable, if you keep practicing, if you keep putting yourself in situations where you have no choice but to improve, eventually you become someone who is confident in public speaking, not because you were born that way, but because repetition created that identity. Look at any skill, any habit, any mindset you have today. It was built through repetition. If you go to the gym every day, even when you don't feel like it, eventually you stop being someone who tries to work out and become someone who is fit. If you make decisions with confidence, even when you're uncertain, eventually you stop second-guessing yourself and become someone who trusts their instincts. If you train yourself to focus, even when distractions are tempting, eventually you stop battling procrastination and become someone who is productive. And your brain is designed to reinforce what is familiar. The more you do something, the stronger the neural pathways become. If you repeatedly avoid challenges, your brain wires itself to see discomfort as something to escape from. If you repeatedly push through obstacles, your brain wires itself to see discomfort as a signal for growth. If you repeatedly take action despite fear, you become someone who is courageous, not because the fear disappears, but because you've conditioned yourself to act anyway. And it's not just actions, it's also the thoughts you allow to run through your mind every day. If you constantly tell yourself, I'm not good enough, I always fail, or I don't deserve success, then that repetition creates an identity of limitation. But if you repeatedly affirm, I am capable, I always figure things out, I am relentless, then over time, that repetition reshapes your identity, and once your identity shifts, your behavior follows automatically. Repetition is how habits are formed. Repetition is how confidence is built. Repetition is how discipline is developed. And most importantly, repetition is how your identity is created. The version of you that exists today is simply the result of what you've repeated the most. The question is, what are you repeating? Because whether you realize it or not, every thought you think, every action you take, every habit you reinforce is casting a vote for the person you are becoming. Look at any person who has achieved mastery in their field, athletes, entrepreneurs, artists, leaders. They weren't born that way. They became that way through relentless repetition. They trained their minds, their bodies, their skills over and over again until what was once difficult became second nature, until what once felt impossible became part of who they were. This is why change is possible for anyone. You are not stuck with the identity you have now. You can rewrite it by consciously choosing what you repeat. If you want to be more disciplined, you don't wait for discipline to magically appear. You start acting disciplined every single day until it becomes second nature. If you want to be confident, you don't wait to feel confident. You practice stepping into confidence over and over until your brain no longer questions it. The key to transformation isn't doing something once, it's doing it so often that it becomes a core part of your identity. Whatever you want to become, start repeating the behaviors and thoughts that align with that version of you. Because in the end, you don't become what you wish for, you become what you repeatedly do. Everything you want in life, confidence, success, leadership, discipline, resilience, it's not something you wait for, it's something you step into. You don't become the best version of yourself by sitting back, hoping, waiting for permission, or expecting change to happen on its own. You become it by acting as if you already are that person long before the results show up. Most people make the mistake of thinking that transformation happens after they achieve something, that they'll be confident once they have success, that they'll be disciplined once they feel motivated, that they'll be a leader once someone recognizes them, but that's backwards. The truth is, you must act as if before you have proof. You must step into the identity of the person you want to become, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when it feels like a lie, even when the results aren't there yet. Because identity shapes behavior, and behavior creates reality. Look at the most successful people in any field. None of them waited until they felt ready. They didn't wait for external validation. They decided who they were and they acted accordingly. They didn't wait for the world to crown them, they crowned themselves. They started showing up as if they were already at the top of their game long before anyone else believed it. And eventually, because they kept showing up that way, their external reality caught up to their internal decision. This is how confidence is built. If you act as if you are confident, if you stand tall, if you speak with certainty, if you make decisions without hesitation, your brain starts to believe it. At first it might feel fake. At first it might feel like you're pretending, but over time, the repetition of those actions rewires your identity until one day you're no longer acting, you simply are. It's the same with discipline. If you wait until you feel like a disciplined person, you'll be waiting forever. But if you start acting as if you are someone who is disciplined, if you wake up early, if you push through resistance, if you stick to your commitments even when it's inconvenient, your identity shifts. What once felt forced becomes natural. The external results will follow, but the shift starts the moment you decide to act as if. Because the brain doesn't know the difference between reality and what you repeatedly tell it. If you tell yourself, I'm not good at this, I've never been lucky, I always struggle, your brain accepts that as truth and works to reinforce it. But if you flip the script, if you tell yourself, I am capable, I always find a way, I refuse to settle, and then you act in alignment with those statements, your brain begins to rewire itself. It starts to create the pathways that match the behaviors you are embodying. This is why high performers step into success so fast. Because they don't wait for circumstances to change before they shift their identity. They act as if, and the world adjusts accordingly. They don't wait for someone to tell them they're a leader. They act as if they already are, and because of that, people start following them. They don't wait for someone to give them permission to be successful. They act as if they already are successful, and because of that, they start making the moves that bring success into reality. Think about it. When you walk into a room, the way you carry yourself determines how people treat you. If you walk in with uncertainty, with hesitation, with self-doubt, people will perceive you as unsure and they will respond accordingly. But if you walk in as if you own the space, as if you belong, as if you are someone worth listening to, the world mirrors that energy back to you. This isn't about faking it. This isn't about pretending to be something you're not. This is about recognizing that who you become is a choice, and you can choose to step into that identity right now. It's about leading your own transformation instead of waiting for it. It's about deciding that you are already the person you need to be and proving it through your actions day after day until it's no longer a question. Because the moment you act as if, your mind starts finding ways to make it true. You start taking bolder actions. You start making different decisions. You start creating momentum. And with enough momentum, the gap between who you were and who you want to be disappears. And because now you're not just acting as if, you are. Everything we've talked about today, your past, your decisions, your standards, the labels you accept, the surroundings you immerse yourself in, the behaviors you repeat, all of it comes back to one thing: identity. Because in the end, identity is not just who you think you are, it is the invisible force shaping every choice, every action, every result in your life. If you want to change your future, change your identity. If you want to achieve more, expand who you believe yourself to be. If you want to break free from limitations, refuse to accept the identity that keeps you small. The moment you shift who you are at your core, everything around you begins to shift as well. But here's the key: this is your responsibility. No one is coming to hand you a new identity. No one is going to give you permission to step into your highest potential. This is a choice only you can make. You have to claim it, own it, embody it every single day. So ask yourself, Who am I committed to becoming? What identity do I refuse to carry any longer? What new standard am I setting for my life? Starting now, because today is not just another day. This is the line in the sand. This is the moment everything changes. The past does not define you. Your fears do not control you. Your identity is yours to shape, and the time to rise into it is right now.